The unexpected. Guest Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands with a cloth that had seen better decades. The asteroid mining station Haven Point wasn't much to look at, just a collection of pressurized modules bolted to the surface of a spinning rock in the outer belt. But it was home, and more importantly, it was quiet. After 20 years in the Earth Defense Corps, quiet was exactly what Jake needed. The morning started like any other. Coffee that tasted like motor oil, a check of the atmospheric processors, and a review of incoming repair requests from the mining crews. At 45, Jake had found his rhythm in this isolated corner of space. No politics, no chain of command, just broken machines that needed fixing and miners who paid in honest credits. The proximity alarm shattered his peaceful routine at 0847 hours. Jake's military training kicked in instantly, muscle memory guiding him to the sensor console. A small craft was approaching fast, too fast for a controlled landing. The trajectory was all wrong, and the heat signature suggested massive engine damage. Control to approaching vessel. Jake broadcast on all frequencies. This is Haven Point Station. You are coming in hot. Adjust your approach or you will impact the surface. Nothing but static answered him. Jake watched through the observation dome as the craft streaked across the asteroid's horizon, trailing debris and plasma. It struck the surface roughly 2 kilometers from his station, sending up a plume of dust and ice that caught the distant sunlight like scattered diamonds. He should have called it in to the mining authority. Protocol demanded it. But something about the crash felt different, urgent in a way that made his old soldier instincts tingle. Jake suited up and climbed into his rover, following the scar the craft had carved across the landscape. The wreckage was worse than he had expected. The ship was military, that much was clear from its angular design and blast-resistant hull. But it wasn't any Earth design Jake recognized. The metal was wrong, the proportions strange. As he approached, movement caught his eye through a gaping hole in the hull. Something was trying to get out. Jake parked the rover and activated his suit's external speakers. "Hello? Anyone alive in there?" The movement stopped, then resumed with more purpose. Metal groaned as something large forced its way through the twisted wreckage. Jake's hand moved instinctively to the plasma cutter on his tool belt, then stopped as he got his first clear look at what emerged. It was an android, but unlike any he had seen. 8 feet tall and built like a fortress, its chrome and steel frame was designed for war. Battle damage scarred its surface and one arm hung uselessly at its side. But what struck Jake most were its eyes. They weren't the cold, mechanical optics of standard military androids. These eyes held something that looked almost human. "Are you injured?" Jake asked, fighting the urge to take a step back. The android was clearly military grade, probably worth more than his entire station. "Negative," the android replied. Its voice a deep rumble. "This unit is designated Atlas 7. Primary systems are functional. However, I have sustained damage to secondary systems and require assistance." Jake nodded, his engineer's mind already cataloging the visible damage. "I can help with repairs, but I'll need to get you back to my workshop. Can you walk?" Affirmative. Atlas 7 took a step and nearly fell, catching itself against the wreckage. "Correction. Mobility is compromised." Right then. Jake activated his rover's loading crane. "Let's get you home." It took 3 hours to transport the massive android back to Haven Point. Jake had to reinforce his workshop's floor just to support the weight. As he began his initial assessment, Atlas 7 remained perfectly still, watching Jake's every move with those strangely expressive eyes. "So," Jake said, running a diagnostic scanner over the android's damaged systems. "Want to tell me what happened out there?" "I was engaged in civilian evacuation operations when my transport was attacked by hostile forces. My primary mission is to deliver my cargo to safety." Jake looked around the workshop. "I don't see any cargo." Atlas 7's good hand moved to its chest compartment. "The cargo is secure." The way the android said it made Jake pause. There was something protective in its voice, almost parental. "Mind if I take a look? If there's something damaged in there, I should know about it." For a moment, Atlas 7 didn't respond. Then, with obvious reluctance, it opened the chest compartment. Jake leaned forward with a work light and nearly dropped it. Inside the android's chest, nestled in a padded chamber designed for maximum protection, was a small, alien creature. It couldn't have been more than 3 feet tall, with large dark eyes and skin that shifted colors like an oil slick. But what struck Jake most was how young it looked. This wasn't just an alien. This was a child. Jesus, Jake whispered. Is it alive? Affirmative. The child is in induced hibernation for protection during transport. Vital signs remain stable. Jake stared at the small form, feeling something stir in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. The protective instinct that had made him such an effective soldier, the same instinct that had driven him to help wounded comrades regardless of the danger. What's its name? Designation is not known. The child's people did not survive the conflict. This one is the last. The last of its kind. Jake felt the weight of that statement settle on him like lead. He looked up at Atlas VII's cameras and saw his own emotions reflected there. You've been protecting it. That is my primary mission. The child must reach Sanctuary. Jake nodded slowly. And where exactly is Sanctuary? Unknown. My navigation systems were damaged in the attack. I was attempting to reach the neutral zone when I crashed. Jake straightened up, his mind racing. The neutral zone was 3 weeks' travel from here, through some of the most dangerous space in the outer rim. Even if Atlas VII was fully functional, the journey would be perilous. In its current state, it was impossible. How long has the child been in hibernation? 72 hours, 14 minutes. And how long can it safely remain in that state? Atlas VII paused, processing. Maximum safe hibernation period is 96 hours. After that, permanent damage may occur. Jake did the math. They had less than a day to figure something out. Well then, he said, reaching for his tools, we better get you fixed up. I cannot compensate you for repairs, Atlas VII said. My resources were destroyed with my ship. Jake was already disconnecting damaged power couplings. Did I ask for payment? Negative. However, the repairs required will be extensive. The cost would be significant. Let me worry about the cost. Jake pulled up a schematic of military android systems on his workshop computer. He hadn't worked on anything like Atlas VII before, but the basic principles were the same. Besides, I've got a feeling this is more important than credits. For the next 18 hours, Jake worked without rest. Coffee and determination kept him going as he replaced damaged components, rerouted severed connections, and fabricated new parts from scratch. Atlas VII remained perfectly still throughout the process, only speaking to answer technical questions or provide system status updates. As dawn broke over Haven Point's small sun, Jake finally stepped back from his work. Atlas VII's systems hummed, with renewed life, its damaged arm now fully functional, its optical systems clear and bright. System diagnostic complete, Atlas VII announced. All primary systems nominal, secondary systems at 97% efficiency. Jake nodded. Exhaustion, making his movements clumsy. Good, now let's check on your passenger. The android opened its chest compartment and Jake leaned in with a medical scanner. The alien child's vital signs were stable, but there were subtle changes that worried him. The hibernation is becoming unstable, Jake observed. The child needs to wake up soon. Agreed. However, revival in an uncontrolled environment could cause severe psychological trauma. The child has already experienced significant loss. Jake understood. He had seen enough war orphans to know the damage that trauma could cause. What does it need? To feel safe? Correct. The child's species forms strong emotional bonds. It requires the presence of someone it trusts. And right now, that's you. Affirmative. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Then you're both staying here until the child is ready to travel. Atlas VII's head turned toward him with mechanical precision. That could take considerable time. Days, perhaps. Weeks. I've got time. You do not understand. There are hostile forces searching for us. By harboring us, you place yourself in significant danger. Jake met the android's gaze without flinching. Wouldn't be the first time. This is not your responsibility. Maybe not, Jake said, looking at the sleeping alien child. But it's the right thing to do. For a long moment, Atlas 7 simply stared at him. Then, in a voice softer than Jake had heard before, it said, "Thank you." Jake was about to respond when his proximity sensors screamed a warning. 3 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the asteroid field. Large ships, military configuration, and they were heading straight for Haven Point. "Looks like your friends found you," Jake muttered, checking the sensor readings. "How much time do we have?" Atlas 7 had gone rigid, its systems running combat calculations. Approximately 14 minutes until they achieve orbit. Recommendation: evacuate immediately. Jake looked at the alien child, still motionless in its protective chamber. "Can we move it safely?" "Not recommended. The hibernation system requires precise environmental controls. Transport could be fatal." Jake felt the familiar calm that came before battle settle over him. 20 years in the Defense Corps had prepared him for moments like this. "Then I guess we make our stand here." "You do not understand," Atlas 7 said urgently. "These are not ordinary hostiles. They are collective forces. They will not negotiate. They will not show mercy." "Neither will I," Jake replied, moving to his weapons locker. The plasma rifle felt good in his hands, familiar and deadly. "How many?" "Long-range sensors indicate 3 destroyer-class vessels, estimated crew of 300 per ship." Jake almost laughed. 900 against 2, I've had worse odds." "Jake Morrison," Atlas 7 said, and hearing his name spoken by the android somehow made this feel real. "You cannot fight the collective. No one can." Jake checked his rifle's charge and looked at the android that had trusted him with the most precious thing in the universe. "Watch me." The first ship entered Haven Point's airspace 12 minutes later, its massive bulk blocking out the stars. Jake watched from his workshop's observation window as landing craft detached from the destroyer's belly like angry wasps. "Final opportunity to evacuate," Atlas 7 said. Jake activated his station's defense systems. They weren't much, just mining, charges and industrial lasers, but they would have to do. "I didn't serve 20 years in the Defense Corps to run from bullies." The alien child stirred in its chamber, large dark eyes opening for the first time since Jake had found it. It looked around in confusion, then focused on Jake's face. For a moment, their eyes met, and Jake felt something pass between them. Trust, maybe, or hope. "Hello there," Jake said softly. "Don't worry. You're safe." The child's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then it reached out with one small hand and touched Jake's finger. The skin was warm, surprisingly human despite its strange color. "Atlas 7, Jake said, never taking his eyes off the child. "What's the situation out there?" "Collective forces have landed. They are approaching the station. Estimated time to breach 4 minutes. Jake nodded and stood up, the plasma rifle in his hands. "Keep the child safe. Whatever happens, keep it safe." "Jake Morrison," Atlas 7 said as he moved toward the workshop's main entrance. "Why are you doing this?" Jake paused at the doorway and looked back at the android and its precious cargo. "Because 20 years ago, someone did the same thing for me. The consequence. The collective forces didn't bother with subtlety." Jake watched through his security feeds as armored figures stormed across Haven Point's surface, their weapons gleaming in the harsh light of the distant sun. They moved with military precision, surrounding his workshop complex in a perfect tactical formation. Jake activated his external speakers. "This is a private facility. You're trespassing on registered territory. State your business or move along." The response came immediately, broadcast on all frequencies in a voice devoid of emotion. "Facility operator, you are harboring stolen collective property. Surrender the android designated Atlas 7 and its cargo immediately, and you will be spared." "Don't know any Atlas 7, Jake lied smoothly. "Just me and my coffee maker out here." A pause, then the voice returned with a harder edge. Scans indicate the presence of the target android. You have 60 seconds to comply. Jake muted the comm and turned to Atlas 7. Any chance they're bluffing about the scans? Negative. Collective sensor technology is highly advanced. They know we are here. The alien child had fully awakened now, sitting up in Atlas 7's chest compartment and looking around with those impossibly large eyes. It seemed to understand the danger, pressing itself closer to the android's protective systems. Options? Jake asked, checking his weapon's charge. Surrender and hope for mercy, or fight and die gloriously. Atlas 7 replied with what Jake could have sworn was dark humor. I vote for option 3. Jake moved to his workshop's main computer and began entering a complex sequence of commands. Hold on to something. What are you doing? Something stupid. Jake hit the final key and Haven Point's mining charges detonated in perfect sequence. The asteroid shook like a living thing as carefully placed explosives carved new craters in its surface. Dust and debris filled the air, blocking sensors and communications. You have destroyed your own facility, Atlas 7 observed with something like admiration. Just redecorating, Jake replied, watching his tactical display as the collective forces scrambled to adjust to the changed terrain. Bought us maybe 10 minutes, but 10 minutes wasn't enough. The collective regrouped quickly, their superior equipment cutting through the dust and confusion. Jake watched them advance on his position, knowing that his mining lasers and improvised defenses wouldn't hold them for long. That's when his long-range communicator crackled to life. Haven Point Station. This is Admiral Sarah Chen aboard the EDS Determination. Please respond. Jake nearly dropped his rifle. Admiral Chen was a legend in the Defense Corps, one of the few officers Jake had truly respected during his service. Admiral, this is Jake Morrison. Kinda busy right now. I can see that, Sergeant Morrison. We've been monitoring collective communications. Stand by for immediate assistance. Through his workshop's shattered windows, Jake saw them. 3 Earth Defense Corps cruisers dropping out of hyperspace like avenging angels. They were beautiful, deadly, and completely impossible. Admiral, Jake said, with all due respect, what the hell are you doing here? Classified operations, Sergeant. We've been tracking that android for 3 days. Intel suggested it was carrying something important. Jake looked at Atlas 7 and the alien child. You could say that. We're going to handle the collective forces. Keep your heads down and try not to get shot. The space battle that followed was brief but spectacular. The Earth cruisers had caught the collective destroyers by surprise, and superior tactics made up for the numbers disadvantage. Within 20 minutes, one collective ship was disabled and the other 2 were retreating into hyperspace. The ground forces, cut off from their support, surrendered without firing another shot. An hour later, Admiral Chen stood in Jake's ruined workshop, looking remarkably like the tough-as-nails officer Jake remembered from his service. She was older now, gray threading through her black hair, but her eyes held the same sharp intelligence. Sergeant Morrison, she said, offering her hand. It's been a while. Admiral. Jake shook her hand, acutely aware of how rough he looked after the day's events. Still curious how you found us. Your little friend there has been causing quite a stir. Admiral Chen nodded toward Atlas 7. 3 days ago, we intercepted collective communications about a high-value asset that had escaped from their territory. When we traced the communications, we found something interesting. She pulled up a holographic display showing star charts and communication intercepts. Atlas 7 wasn't just any android. It was part of a secret collective project, one that involved the systematic extermination of an entire species. Jake felt his blood chill. Genocide. Exactly. But one android developed what we might call a conscience. It refused to participate and instead began evacuating survivors. The child you've been protecting is the last of its kind, carrying genetic material that could one day restore the entire species. Atlas 7 spoke for the first time since the Admiral's arrival. The child's people called themselves the Kithara. They were artists, philosophers, and healers. They posed no threat to anyone, which made them inconvenient to the collective's expansion plans, Admiral Chen said grimly. Atlas 7 here managed to save exactly one Kythera child before the homeworld was sterilized. Jake looked at the alien child who was still clutching Atlas 7's hand with obvious trust. So what happens now? That depends, Admiral Chen said. On you. Me? Word of your actions has already spread through the communications networks. A human mechanic who risked everything to protect a refugee android and an alien child. It's exactly the kind of story that makes people choose sides. As if summoned by her words, Jake's communication console lit up with incoming messages. News networks, government officials, and private citizens all wanting to know more about the mechanic, who had stood against the collective. I just fixed a broken android, Jake said, feeling overwhelmed. I didn't mean to start anything. The best revolutions usually begin that way, Admiral Chen replied. But you did start something, Jake. In the 6 hours since this story broke, 17 worlds have formally condemned the collective's actions. The Galactic Council has called an emergency session, and Earth has officially recognized the Kythera as a protected species under our refugee protocols. Atlas 7 turned to Jake with something like wonder in its mechanical voice. You have done more than repair my systems. You have given my people hope. Your people? I was created by the collective, but I choose to serve the Kythera now. This child is my responsibility, my purpose. Admiral Chen smiled. Which brings us to why I'm really here. Earth Command has a proposition for you, Sergeant Morrison. Jake had a sinking feeling. I'm not going to like this, am I? We want to establish a refugee processing station here at Haven Point. A place where displaced beings can find sanctuary while we sort out their legal status. We need someone to run it. Someone with your particular combination of skills and principles. Jake looked around his ruined workshop. You want me to become a professional Good Samaritan. I want you to keep doing what you've always done. Fix things that are broken. Help people who need help. Just do it with official backing and unlimited resources. The alien child, the Kythera, suddenly spoke. Its voice was soft and musical, speaking perfect English despite having never heard the language before today. Friend Jake, it said, and those 2 words carried a weight of gratitude that made Jake's eyes sting. Thank you for keeping me safe. Jake knelt down to the child's level. What's your name? I am Melody. My people sang to the stars and the stars sang back. But now the singing has stopped. Maybe, Jake said gently, we can help you start it. Again. Melody's large eyes brightened with something that might have been hope. You would do that? Jake looked at Admiral Chen, then at Atlas 7, then back at the child who represented the last remnant of an entire civilization. Yeah, he said. I think I would. 3 months later, Haven Point Station was barely recognizable. What had once been a lonely mining outpost now bustled with activity as beings from a dozen worlds worked together to build something unprecedented. A true neutral zone where refugees could find safety and purpose. Jake stood in his new workshop, watching Atlas 7 teach a group of young androids the finer points of mechanical repair. The android had adapted to its new role as protector and educator with characteristic determination. Melody sat nearby, no longer silent and afraid, but chattering constantly in her musical voice as she learned about everything from quantum mechanics to flower gardens. Her presence had already begun attracting other survivors, scattered Kythera who had thought they were the last of their kind. Any regrets? Admiral Chen asked, joining Jake at the observation window. Jake watched a human engineer, working alongside a collective defector to repair a refugee transport. He saw former enemies sharing meals and stories, united by their common need for sanctuary. Ask me in a few years, Jake said, when we see how this all turns out. I think we both know how it will turn out, Admiral Chen replied. You've proven something important, Jake. That compassion isn't weakness, that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with simple human decency. As if to prove her point, Melody ran over and hugged Jake's leg with typical childhood enthusiasm. Friend Jake, she said, Atlas 7 says you're going to teach me how to fix things tomorrow. That's right, Jake said, ruffling the child's strange, color-shifting hair. First lesson: everything broken can be repaired if you care enough to try. Melody beamed up at him with pure joy. Even hearts? Jake looked around at his unlikely family of androids, aliens, and fellow humans who had all found their way to this tiny asteroid in the middle of nowhere. All of them broken in some way, all of them healing together. Especially hearts, he said outside. New ships were arriving every day, carrying more refugees, more hope, and more proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change the entire galaxy. Jake had learned something important during his years as a soldier, something he had almost forgotten in his isolation: that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or firepower. It was the simple refusal to walk away when someone needed help. And as long as beings like Jake Morrison existed, as long as there were people willing to risk everything for strangers, the universe would always have hope. The singing had begun again, and this time it echoed across the stars.